Now, in terms of embassies around the world, do you care to tell us how many embassies do we have around the world and what they are?
Okay, St. Kitts-Nevis, you said embassies. We do have embassies, and we also have an equivalent based in Commonwealth countries, which are called high commissions.
Mm-hmm.
In the United States, we do have an embassy based in Washington, but adjunct to that is the permanent mission to the OAS,
Yes.
the Organization of American States. But we have one embassy
Mm-hmm.
based in the U.S. We have two permanent missions based in the U.S. One, as I said, based in Washington to the Organization of American States, and we also have one to the United Nations based in New York.
Mm-hmm.
In London, we have one also, but that is considered a high commission because the UK is a Commonwealth country, and so those based in Commonwealth countries are called high commissions,
Sure.
but they do the same thing as an embassy.
Okay.
We also have in Canada a high commission, because Canada is a Commonwealth country, and in Jamaica as well, which is a Commonwealth country, we have a high commission. In Dubai, we have not a high commission or embassy, but a consulate general that is headed by a consul general, and they perform mainly consular matters,
Okay.
dealing with citizens who are there, citizens who require passports, visas, and so on. They do not necessarily deal with political matters, and but they perform a very important function as well. In Canada, we also have a consulate, honorary consulate, based in Toronto, which addresses the needs of our very large diaspora there in Toronto. In Cuba, we have an embassy, and that is currently headed by a charge d'affaires, until an ambassador, of course, is named. So those are where we have our representation at the moment. We have honorary consuls based all over. We have one in Brazil, we have in the United States, we have in Miami, Pennsylvania, Los Angeles. We do have honorary consuls there. We have honorary consuls in Turkey, one in Belgium, Nigeria, Switzerland, Germany, France, and the Dominican Republic. We also have one in India. One was recently named in Vietnam, and perhaps very soon we'll have one in the Philippines as well.
Okay. Now, is it very costly to maintain these embassies? And
Yes, it is very costly, but the government sees a need to have these representations throughout the world. It says a lot about how important we think it is to have these relations, bilateral relations, and it also introduces people who have never heard of St. Kitts and Nevis to get to know St. Kitts and get to learn about our culture and our people. So it is very costly, but it is worth the cost. The costs are justified because it is in establishing diplomatic relations and bilateral relations that our economy can be helped, our people can advance their studies through assistance, technical assistance, and otherwise from our partners overseas.
Sure. Now, could you tell us a little bit? I know you have touched on a lot on foreign affairs, and we are going to come back to that. But could you tell us a little bit in terms of aviation?
Yes.
Because you're also the permanent secretary for aviation
Yes.
as well.
Yes, it occurred
and how
to me.
important it is that aviation is in terms of establishing links as well.
Yes, it is very important. Interestingly, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs is linked with aviation. We are known to be, or the minister is a regulator to ensure that the arms of government responsible for safety at our ports are doing what they're supposed to do in line with international standards.
Yes.
We are, of course, monitored and governed by ICAO, which is the International Civil Aviation Organization based in Canada, and some of the annexes pertain to different operations at our ports, and so we ensure through our civil aviation officer, Mr. Royston Griffin, that the stakeholders are managing their areas, ensuring that they upkeep the standards and the mandates that are prescribed by law, national law, as well as international standards.
Okay. Very good. Now, back to you, to the ministry itself in terms of development within the ministry, staff development, and activities within the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Aviation. Are there any recent staff developments?
Staff development, Mr. Williams, we consider to be very important. The ministry will not survive unless its staff, its workers become even more competent and skillful. And so we have embarked on a project to enhance the skills of our staff. I am pleased to inform that we just had returning from Jamaica, Mr. Michael Penny and Mr. Bjorn Hazel, who had a week stint at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade of Jamaica. We had pursued a training or an attachment for workers to their protocol department. As you know, protocol is something that is related to the activities of foreign affairs. In fact, I think most of the public believe that that is all we do, protocol. Unfortunately, it is, or fortunately, it is not so. But we realize the need for training in this area. And so these two officers had the opportunity to visit Jamaica for an entire week, and they followed the chief of protocol and her staff around. We understand that the Prime Minister has his own protocol department, and there's a protocol arm in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. But what they do is what we do. They probably just do it maybe more professionally and effectively. And so we thought that it was important, that our officers got an opportunity to observe what other persons do. They have similar activities, and it would be good to model what they do so that we can improve what we do. We also have currently in South Korea, Miss Chanel Simmons. She is there for about 3 months. She will be studying language and culture. She already knows Mandarin, French and Spanish, and so she will be now learning the Korean language. We have Shara Maynard, who just returned from the Netherlands. She pursued studies at the Netherlands Institute for Diplomacy, and she had diplomatic training about 2 months in the Netherlands. And we had Sonia Body, who recently returned from Chile. She attended courses at the Diplomatic Academy in Chile. And Miss Tuvia France returned only last week from Geneva, Switzerland, where she had an attachment with the UN, United Nations, in Geneva, specifically dealing with human rights. So, yes, we are intent on building capacity within the ministry, and we are pleased that our international partners, may I add that most of these were at no cost to government. Due to scholarships and offers of technical assistance, they have been able to pursue these training activities and exercises at relatively little or no cost to government.
No, that is so important, the building of capacity that you mentioned, because that is going to help with our foreign affairs agenda as well, our relationships around the world. Now, you recently attended a United Nations meeting in Geneva, Switzerland, that had to do with the Human Rights Council. It was a review, I think a periodic review of some recommendations pertaining to human rights. And you articulated the position of St. Kitts-Nevis on human rights in Geneva. You gave a report on the Universal Periodic Review for consideration to the 46th meeting of the 31st regular session of the Human Rights Council. There were 133 recommendations, and of those 133, St. Kitts-Nevis accepted 58 and noted 75. And it was said that the 75 that were noted are due to the fact that they would require greater commitment of resources, prolonged assessments of the implications on the overall national agenda, and consultation with multiple stakeholders before the next cycle. Can you tell us some more about these recommendations, those that were accepted and those that were noted, and what do you think more can be done to bring awareness to human rights in St. Kitts and Nevis?
Well, Mr. Williams, I think this is an awareness campaign right now. Thanks to the St. Kitts and Nevis Information Service for creating a press release after I returned from Geneva.
Yes.
I think the public is unaware that St. Kitts and Nevis, as a member of the United Nations, is mandated to report on its human rights now every 4.5 years. It is the Universal Periodic Review is a mechanism within the Human Rights Council of the United Nations. This came about in 2006. The reason being that previously it used to be just a few countries whose human rights used to come under the magnifying glass, or used to be under the microscope. So now, in 2006, a decision was made that it should be a universal thing. All countries of the United Nations have to give a report or are accountable for their human rights. And so every 4.5 years, initially it was every 4 years, and St. Kitts and Nevis had to present a national report to the Human Rights Council working group. That was done in 2010, 2011, and 47 countries were there. They made recommendations as to how we can improve on our human rights. They commended us as well on some of the efforts that we were making to promote and protect our human rights. We had to return in 2015, 2016, again to report on what advances we had made with respect to those recommendations that were made. As you know, a lot of the human rights issues concern social and community development, and therefore I was accompanied to Geneva the first time by the Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Social Services, Ms. Janelle Lewis, and we were ably assisted by her director, Ms. Azilla Clark, to write the report, and also by the legal department. The aspects of that report considered the vulnerable groups, the marginal groups, children, youth, women, the elderly, the disabled, and so we had to address all of those needs. We were keen to point out that the debt situation, of course, hindered us in some way making some progress, because a lot of it required some resources, financial and otherwise. So we were not able to fulfill all of the recommendations, but we made it clear that St. Kitts and Nevis was willing to fulfill its obligations on the international instruments, and most of the recommendations that were noted as opposed to accepted pertained to the death penalty. And
well, from what I saw, for example, because I read some of the comments of some of the bodies, and many of them basically commended St. Kitts for the advances
we had made,
that we had made in terms of human rights and the promotion of human rights and awareness in terms of human rights. There was one group in particular, though, the Allied Rainbow Group or something, said that they had noted with a lot of concern that the minority group of the LGBT, that St. Kitts and Nevis had not moved, but only noted to decriminalize certain things that they feel can engender, discrimination. Tolerance. And all of that sort of a thing. So I suppose that the United Nations and so on is looking at all of that in terms of human rights. Did you get that?
That is an aspect of human rights. The rights of all people to have freedom of association. I think that we made it clear in our report that the government on a whole does not encourage discrimination, and it is in our laws, of course, and I think that the culture is such that as of now, I don't know how accepting the public will be on it, but I think that it encourages discussion, and we were clear on that point that the government is not encouraging discrimination against any types of groups, but consultation going forward as to what move the government will make.
Right. Now, even in terms of the death penalty, I know recently the Prime Minister stated that St. Kitts-Nevis is making no move to abolish the death penalty, yet we are seeing worldwide that a number of countries are abolishing the death penalty, especially in Europe. And sometime last year, I think it was in November, I attended a conference in Guyana. It was a European Union conference, and it was basically on the abolition of the death penalty within the Caribbean. And it was quite an interesting debate to see that while the Caribbean, especially countries in the Caribbean, hold on to the death penalty, that the crime rate is still so high, and that a number of countries where the death penalty has been abolished, like in some of those European countries and so on. Man, you have a wave of terrorism and all kind of thing now. But in terms of, for example, England, our law basically came from England, and they have long abolished it. But we have still hold on to it as a deterrent to crime. But who has the proof?
Yes, I think there are a number of studies. There's a number of studies that has been done that claim that the death penalty is not a deterrent to crime. However, based on our situation in St. Kitts, we know the realities. We know how we have been plagued by the increase in homicides amongst our young people. And it's because a lot of social problems. And I think that what we tried to do in presenting our report was to appeal to the international community.
To give us assistance.
To give assistance, to help us to be able to address the social issues that may be engendering the rise in crime and the surge in crime. And so we hope that that message was received, and that we will be able to address the problems that lead to crime. However, we also shared the fact that no hangings occurred in St. Kitts for over 8 years. I think the last one was in 2008.
2008, but it was one of the last ones in the region.
Yes.
So
yes. And so we were able to put those facts forward, and it was for the international community to examine our human rights.
Now, on this very same topic of human rights, recently on March 8th, the world celebrated International Women's Day. And you are a top civil servant. You're a woman, very competent, very intelligent, very able. And do you think that enough is being done in the Federation to promote women's rights, equality, and empowerment?
I think there's always room for improvement. I think St. Kitts-Nevis has come a long way. I recall when I was a young person, you hardly found women in top positions in government. So it is good to look at where we have come from in order to assess where we are. I know we like to look at other countries and other contexts to compare and contrast, but if we examine where we've come from, I think we've come quite a distance. Of course, there's a way to go, but I think women, we ourselves, we have to present ourselves as being capable. We have to advance ourselves, pursuing as much as possible further education. We have to instill in our children, whether male or female, the need for education, the importance of education, and the need to respect, no matter what gender you are. Because I think that, you don't want to move from one end of the pole to the other. Yes, men may be favored based on salaries and equal pay and so on, but we have to teach our children that persons must be respected no matter the gender. And I think respect for women, for men, this is most important and most critical, and women must respect themselves. And I think if we respect ourselves, the other gender will also respect us.
Certainly.
But I think there's more that could be done by government as well as the private and civil society. And I commend what has been done so far. I commend women who are pursuing their goals, and I want to encourage every young woman who is aspiring to become somebody to continue, no matter what your challenges are. I want to encourage you to pursue your goals. The world is changing. I think when the Minister of Gender Affairs was here, she said it will take a generation to change things. But you yourself can be a life changer. And so I want to encourage you as you're listening to pursue and to aspire to higher heights.
Okay, good. Ms. Bass, we have to go to the phone lines now. We'll have to open the lines and see what our listeners are thinking. We want to hear their suggestions, we want their comments, we want their questions. And so we put on our headphones and we are going to go to the lines.